Today, I want to tell you a story on patience, a story of a music master who believed that any soul, no matter how cold or broken, could be taught to sing if only the teacher was holy enough to endure the waiting. He believed that patience was a coin you paid to God, and that if you paid enough of it, God was obligated to hand you a miracle in return. A long time ago, in a gray stone city where the cold river ran heavy with soot, there lived an organist named Master Julian. Julian was a man who measured his life in corrections. For 30 years, he had sat beside the young people of the parish, tapping his small brass rod against the oak music stand, straightening wrists, sharpening rhythm, smoothing out the jagged edges of clumsy human hands until they could lift a hymn straight to the ceiling. He was not a cruel man, but he was a proud one, though he called his pride devotion. He believed that beauty was a moral duty, and that with enough discipline, grace could be carved out of any piece of timber. Then came Thomas. Thomas was 12 when his father brought him up the narrow spiral stairs of the loft. The boy had thick, heavy wrists, eyes that seemed to fix on nothing at all, and a thumb scarred down the middle from a boyhood accident with a butcher's blade. When he sat at the bench, he did not look at the keys with fear or with joy. He simply sat, his shoulders hunched, waiting for instructions like a horse waiting for a bridle. On that first day, Julian placed the boy's hands upon the keys and played a simple 3-note phrase. He asked Thomas to repeat it. Thomas hit the first note too hard, missed the second entirely, and struck the third with the heel of his hand, making the wooden pedals rattle below. Julian smiled softly then, resting a hand on the boy's stiff shoulder. He told himself this was his calling. Anyone could teach the gifted child who practically played in his sleep. But to take this ruin of a boy, this quiet, lumpen thing, and turn him into a musician, that would be a true monument to God's mercy. It would prove that no soul was beyond the reach of holy labor. 5 years passed. They sat together every Tuesday afternoon in the freezing choir loft, surrounded by the smell of damp wool and old candle wax. 5 years of the same 3 scales. 5 years of Julian's brass rod tapping against the stand. 5 years of Thomas's scarred thumb slipping off the middle note, over and over, with the exact same blunt, stubborn failure. The boy did not refuse to learn. That was the tragedy of it. He was not rebellious. He arrived early. He sat straight. He tried with a desperate, silent exertion that turned his knuckles white in the cold. But the music simply would not enter him. His brain and his hands were separated by a wall that no amount of instruction could breach. Julian began to rot from the inside. At night, sitting by his small coal fire, the master wrestled with a dark, bitter resentment that horrified him. He found himself hating the sound of the boy's heavy boots coming up the stairs. He found himself rationalizing his anger, telling himself that Thomas was lazy, that Thomas was mockingly slow, that God was being unfair by wasting a master's talent on a bucket that could hold no water. But under all the rationalizations lay a terrifying truth. Julian was not angry because the boy was failing. Julian was angry because he was failing. The miracle had not arrived. The coin had been paid, and God had returned no interest. His life's philosophy, that human effort could force a soul into grace, was crumbling beneath the flat, dull clack of Thomas's thumb hitting the wrong key. One late November evening, when the snow was turning to black slush in the street below, the breaking point came. Julian had spent 40 minutes on a single measure of a simple lullaby. Thomas hit the wrong note for the 20th time that hour. The sound hung in the empty church, ugly and sour. Julian snapped. He did not yell, he was too refined for that, but he pulled his hands back, placed his brass rod on the ledge, and looked at the young man, now 17, sitting beside him. He told Thomas that they were finished. He said that some ground was simply too stony for seed, and that to continue would be a sin of presumption against God's design. He told him to put on his coat and go home. Thomas did not move. He did not cry. He slowly pulled his heavy hands off the keys and rested them on his knees. Julian waited for the boy to leave, but Thomas remained still, looking down at his own scarred thumb. And then, in the quiet darkness of the loft, Thomas spoke. His voice was low, rough, and thick with an apology he could barely form. He told the master that he knew he was stupid. He knew he would never play the hymn for the bishop. He knew he made the master's head ache. But he asked, so softly it was almost swallowed by the stone walls, if he might still come on Tuesdays just to sit on the bench. Because his father beat him at home, and the street was full of men who mocked him, and this loft was the only place in the world where anyone had ever paid attention to him for an hour. The breath left Julian as if he had been struck in the chest. In that single, agonizing second, the scales fell from the master's eyes, and he saw himself with a clarity that felt like damnation. He saw that for 5 years, he had not been teaching a boy, he had been carving an idol of his own righteousness. He had viewed Thomas not as a human soul to be loved, but as a project to be completed, a trophy to present to God as proof of his own heroic patience. He had demanded that the boy change so that the teacher could feel holy. Thomas had never needed to become a master organist. Thomas had simply needed a shepherd who would not drive him out into the cold. Julian looked at the boy's red, stiff fingers. He looked at the bruised, hopeless quiet in Thomas's eyes. The master reached out, his own hand trembling, and picked up the music sheet. He did not take up the brass rod. He slid it into his coat pocket, never to use it again. He shifted closer on the narrow bench, feeling the cold damp radiating from the boy's wool coat. He placed his own hand gently over Thomas's scarred thumb, feeling the faint, rhythmic pulse beneath the skin. He told Thomas to press the first key again. Thomas pressed it. It was still stiff. It was still slightly out of time. But this time, Master Julian did not stop him. Instead, the master reached down with his left hand and struck the low, deep bass note that harmonized with the boy's mistake, wrapping the awkward, lonely sound in a warm, resonant chord that filled the dark church. They sat together in the freezing loft until the single candle burned down to the brass, playing 2 notes over and over into the night, one broken, one steady, and neither one asking the other to be anything more than what it was. And so we learn that true patience is not the arrogant waiting for another person to finally become what we want them to be, but the quiet, costly decision to sit beside them in the dark, long after we have given up the hope of being praised for saving them.